Good afternoon, everyone. Little topic I want to cover. This is on the back of the proposed fight with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. This is not about that because I haven't really got a lot to say about that. I don't think it's really worth it. But I get asked a lot by, especially non-boxing people or people who have not competed in sort of sports to a certain degree and that sort of stuff. I often get the question like, when I hear people having these comebacks, I get the question like, oh, why are they coming back? Why do they come back? And obviously, a lot of times, money has got a lot to do with it. Obviously, we know that money's got a lot to do with it. But and this happens with rock stars, that tour a lot. If you listen to a lot of famous sort of rock stars, when they've been on tour for like 12 months, they find it really hard to come back and assimilate to normality. Because when you've had those elevated highs, the adrenalines and the endorphins of those super high, elevated sort of sense of, if you've done sport to a higher level, if you've performed in front of crowds, you can't get that high. And when you haven't got that high, because normal life doesn't provide you with that high, it's very hard to deal with. And this is why a lot of sort of former sports stars or singers or rock stars end up with addiction problems, drink or drugs, because when you're used to living a life of constant highs, and Ricky Hatton talks about this, when that's gone, when the roar of the crowd and the adrenaline and the buzz of the fight, that honestly, unless you've been there, it's very hard to understand. It's very hard to get over in words. But this is why a lot of these people end up with drug addiction problems or alcohol addiction problems. And this is why people have problems with addiction in the first place. A lot of people drink and do drugs socially, and it starts that way, and it ends up becoming more and more frequent, that more and more frequent you are high, and the time you spend without the high or dry or clean, the normality just doesn't live up to the high. And this is why people end up with serious addiction problems and daily users and abusers of drugs and alcohol, because normal life and normality doesn't quite match up to the high. And when you're spending more and more of your time high, those sort of infrequent times you're not high are almost unbearable. Mike Tyson spoke about this on his Hot Boxing podcast, and he said, that when he was boxing, he was a killer, and he knew he was a killer. And then many years after retirement, when that guy has gone and that life has gone, and this was him, and he was in tears when he said this, and he said, I know I'm not that guy anymore. I know I'm not that killer anymore. Because of that, I feel like a bitch, and I hate it. And it's just an indication of how very hard to take not being that Superman anymore is when you've been it. If you've never not been it, you'll never miss it. But I finished boxing because of repeated injuries, and then I used to train resistance training, lift weights to quite a really good level, and I was medically made to give up that because of a heart condition, but that's neither here nor there. And it is, and I know a lot of people in the same boat, and it's very hard when you've been you feel like you've been Superman. You've been at your very physical peak. And for people who've never trained or never boxed, who've never took part in any of these things, if you've never felt that, you'll never understand what it is to lose it. Do you know what I'm saying? Is that okay? And this is what Mike Tyson was trying to get across. Now he knows he's not that killer, and he knows he's not that superhuman physical elite. It's very hard to take not being that person anymore. When you've had a taste of that, you want more. When you can't have no more, some people struggle. It's a struggle for everyone, affecting myself in certain ways, but I think it's misunderstood. And when like Mike Tyson coming back in this, a part of that, other than the money, will be to reclaim that feeling and to reclaim that sense back to himself and try and grab some of that back and be that person again. It's a very hard thing to take, but this is why, Ricky Hatton spoke about it, that after those nights of, no one can imagine what it feels like, to be fighting a world title fight on TV in front of millions of TV viewers and doing that regularly, and then having that taken away through age or retirement or injury, and then having to come down to be a normal civilian. A lot of ex-squaddies suffer this when they come back, from service, or they've come back from tours, or come back from any theatre of war around the world. When they have to assimilate back into normal life, they struggle. because they've lived something that's so abnormal that normal is a real struggle, and losing that sense of purpose, that's the sense of identity. You've been heavyweight champion of the world. You've been a singer selling out stadiums around the world. You can equate it to whatever sort of elite level of sport or the arts or whatever. But once you've experienced it, when you come back and you're not that anymore, you can't do that anymore. That loss of identity is very, very hard to take. And sometimes the only way to almost artificially recreate that, or artificially recreate the highs that you used to get that you now almost can't live out, is to turn to alcohol or drugs or other addiction things. But yeah, I just want to talk about that. That's my view anyway of when a lot of these guys come back. They miss that. They miss being that elite gladiator. They miss that feeling of being a warrior. It's very hard to take when you're not that anymore. And there's a certain amount of, for these guys, I want to taste that again. I want that back. I want that person back. It's quite a sad thing in a way. It's quite a thing to sort of take. And you know, like I said, very hard for people who've not sort of experienced anything like that to understand, because if you've never had it and you've never lost it, so you've never missed it. But yeah, just want to talk about that. You know, just thought it was something worth talking about. But that's why a lot of these people struggle, and it's why a lot of these people end up with addictions, and that's why a lot of people end up making comebacks or trying to get that back and trying to capture that again and trying to be that person again. It's hard to take when you know that's not you anymore. But anyway, you know, just my thoughts. I'll see you all soon.